9. This is the only Principles First show in Missouri politics, where ideas are judged by first principles, not party politics, not party priorities, not cults of personality. On this show, we recognize there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. That intentions, well, those are great, but incentives matter more. And what a policy produces matter more than what it promises. Here it isn't left versus right, red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican. It is the state versus you. If you want to join the conversation, the call-in line is 660-960-0959. Currently, the temperature outside is 55 degrees. Clear skies. The national debt is $39 trillion. I've got a full mug of coffee. Let's get started. Over the weekend, big news. Big news. Right here in Northwest Missouri, my daughter Marvel came in third in the Bears bracket of her Pinewood Derby race. That's what I was doing Saturday. I was at the Pinewood Derby, just at North Andrew, so I had that going on. Apparently, though, there were protests all over the country. The No Kings protests. Apparently, that's a big deal. They're demonstrating, just so you know, they're demonstrating against President Donald Trump's second administration. And they frame their protests as a rejection of what they call authoritarianism, tyranny, a dictatorship. And they use this No Kings slogan to argue that in America, the power belongs to the people, not to any individual, not to any sovereign ruler, not some wannabe king. That's what they're all about. The movement is coordinated by groups like Indivisible, labor unions, other progressive organizations, commies. I'll put that out there because you look at some of the videos and you got the hammer and the sickle flag waving proudly at these No Kings protests. Their website, "In America, we have no kings. Masked secret police terrorizing our communities. An illegal, catastrophic war putting us in danger and driving up our costs. Trump wants to rule over us as a tyrant." Some of the more frequent issues cited by the protesters, when they could actually articulate what they were out there protesting: immigration enforcement, U.S. involvement with the war with Iran, the rising cost of living, and broader claims of just general democratic backsliding, authoritarian tendencies, a billionaire-first politics. And they have large crowds, and frankly, I couldn't care less what these folks are upset about. Not because I don't like a good protest. I do like a good protest. Not because they're leftists, progressives, liberals, communists, socialists. Not because of that. Mainly, I don't care because of the overt and obvious hypocrisy involved by most of the people, if not all of the people who are out there right now. I won't say all of the people, because a lot of the people out there that I've seen are young. I've also seen a lot of affluent white female liberals out there. Some of the older crowd. I've seen some kids out there. So I can't say all of them are hypocrites. Some of them are tag-along. Some of them are new. But a lot of these organizers are the same people who had no problem telling you needed to get a vaccine in 2022, 2021, 2020. These were the same people who had no problem using heavy-handed authoritarian government power to tell you how to live your life. And it wasn't, I don't want to go all over, we can go all over the country, but even here in Missouri, while we had it pretty good on a state level. Back then, Mike Parson was governor, and he repeatedly refused a statewide mask mandate. He repeatedly refused stay-at-home orders or business closures, and he left decisions to the localities. So that was one of the things that Mike did that was good. He didn't come down hard. But Democratic officials, progressives, and aligned health leaders in those blue areas, places like St. Louis, Columbia, Kansas City, they frequently called for and imposed stricter COVID-19 restrictions. And they lambasted people on the state level who refused. Now, these included mask mandates like Dr. Sam Page. He was the St. Louis County executive, a Democrat, and he issued multiple safer-at-home and stay-at-home executive orders that imposed strict gathering limits. He was telling you how many people you could have in your house. No kings. But they celebrated this. They banned or severely limited indoor dining. They reduced business capacities, 25% in 2020, and required masks for indoor and public spaces. Tashara Jones was the Democratic mayor of St. Louis. She coordinated with Page to reinstate the city's indoor mask mandate in 2021. Lyda Krewson, former mayor of St. Louis, issued the city's stay-at-home order in March of 2020, requiring residents to stay home except for essential activities which the government designed or defined. No kings, folks. No kings except when they're our kings. Lyda Krewson in 2020, July of 2020, she and the St. Louis County jointly mandated masks in public spaces, stating St. Louis and St. Louis County are requiring all of you to do a little more. In Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, another Democratic mayor, issued and repeatedly extended indoor mask mandates, including one effective through at least May of 2021. In August of 2021, he reinstated the mandate for all persons age 5 and above, regardless of vaccination status, saying it was a necessary and immediate step. The Jackson County Legislature, Democratic majority, and aligned health directors extended and supported mask mandates and emergency orders in coordination with Lucas. And then you got Democrats across the state. The Missouri Democratic Party, led by Chairman Michael Butler, then issued statements supporting St. Louis County and St. Louis City mask mandates and criticized Parson as on the wrong side of public health for opposing them. Nicole Galloway was the Democratic auditor and 2020 gubernatorial nominee, and she explicitly campaigned on requiring face masks statewide. And Crystal Quaid, she was the House Minority Leader, a Democrat, called for an earlier, stronger, statewide stay-at-home order. No kings, folks, except when they're their kings. Then they're all for them. And it wasn't just Missouri. And it wasn't just politicians. Because a lot of these organizations, a lot of these events that you see are funded and organized by labor unions too. These labor unions say no kings, but meanwhile, the American Federation of Teachers Local 420 and the Missouri State Teachers Association called for a statewide mask mandate in November 2020. They stressed the involvement of teachers, parents, and local health agencies when reopening decisions and push for universal masking in schools. Meanwhile, no kings. Meanwhile, you may not remember this, I remember COVID well. I remember the struggles to go see my mom in the nursing home when she was there. I remember this story. An unidentified man paddleboarding alone in the ocean off Malibu Pier, perfectly socially distanced. No one else in the water, was chased by Los Angeles County lifeguard boats for 30 to 40 minutes. He ignored repeated orders to exit amid Gavin Newsom's statewide safer at home mandates, while Newsom was eating with friends at the restaurant. There was a Pennsylvania woman who was ticketed for a solo drive. A 19-year-old woman in York County was stopped and given a $200 ticket by state police for driving alone just to get out of the house. Under Governor Tom Wolf's stay-at-home order, another Democrat. She wasn't violating social distancing. It was pure enforcement of non-essential travel bans. She got a $200 ticket for that. A father in Brighton, Colorado, was arrested by police for playing catch with his 6-year-old daughter on a nearby empty softball field, violating the local gathering social distancing rules tied to the state safety emergency orders. The field was deserted. No kings, folks. We're living under tyranny, but they're completely comfortable with this. This is why I don't really care about their protests, because when they're in power, when they get the opportunity, they will do the most ridiculous stuff. They filled a skate park with sand and thought, well, it's for the good of everyone. It's for the good of everyone. Pastor Tony Spell was arrested in Louisiana, arrested and charged with 6 misdemeanor counts for holding large church service despite Governor John Bel Edwards' orders banning gatherings of greater than 50 people. He continued services, but no kings. You can't meet and worship unless the state says so. But we're upset today because of, we have a king. Back then, I remember asking at what cost. That's one of the 3 questions Thomas Sowell recommends asking when you see these aggressive leftist policies and ideas. At what cost? Sure, we take all these kids out of school and allegedly they're safer, but at what cost? If you remember then, it wasn't kids who were most susceptible to COVID. It was the elderly, the obese. There were a lot of comorbidities that went along with this, with the COVID deaths. But it wasn't kids. Kids weren't at risk. Some of them got it and did quite well. But they didn't hesitate then. Now they're upset. Sorry. I was for no kings before it was cool, I guess. 7:19, this is the Dwayne Lester Show. We'll be right back. Obama and Biden. You didn't say anything then. You didn't say anything then. You were upset about immigration now. Obama was called the deporter in chief. He's deported more people than Trump had, even in 1 year. In Obama's 8 years, he deported 3.1 million people, and his peak year was in 2013, when he deported 438,000 people. He was kicking anywhere from 387 to 400,000 a year. Trump doesn't come close to that. Trump's peak year was 2019, and he got maybe 347,000 people. He's not coming anywhere. Obama's looking at him and saying, those are rookie numbers. You got to get those numbers up. But you're upset now. Why? Because your team's not in charge. Your tribe is not the one that's pulling the strings. What about that war in Iran? You've heard this show, folks. I'm upset about the war in Iran. I'm upset because it's unconstitutional. It shouldn't be going on. If Iran's a threat, make the case to Congress and get a declaration of war and go to war. They're upset now that Trump's at war with Iran. President Obama bombed 7 countries minimum: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan. Do you remember any anti-war protests during the Obama administration? I don't remember them. You know why you're not seeing them now? Well, some of them, there was a tweet the other day, Sank from the Young Turks said, you don't see them a lot now because most of these anti-war protests that you see are run by Democrat leaders, and they don't want they don't want all those controversial statements said about Israel. So it's difficult right now for them to have them. You didn't see them during the Obama administrations either. Never saw it. Suddenly, they all just went away. There was a daily countdown on the news when Bush was in office. When someone who's a Republican's in office, well, by all means, we're anti-war. But you change the color of the team from red to blue, suddenly war is really cool. We'll bomb 7 different countries. In 1 year, folks, in 2016, the U.S. dropped an estimated 26,000 bombs in 1 year. 2016. Across 7 different nations. This is an average of 72 bombs a day we were dropping in 2016. President Obama oversaw 563 drone strikes, roughly 10 times more than President Bush. Never saw an anti-war protest during the Obama administration. This is why I don't really care what these people have to say, because for them it isn't about principle. It's about tribalism and parties, and it's not about principle. They show up when their team's not in power, but they're quiet when President Obama is killing American citizens. Regardless of what they're accused of, they're still American citizens, and he's executing them without a trial. Nothing said there. They're totally good with kings, as long as it's their king. 7:29. We've got actually a good show after this. Not that this hasn't been good up to now, but we've got Chamilleia Peterson coming up next. We've got Chris DeGaulle coming up at the top of the hour, and then Representative Josh Hurlbert be coming in to talk about what's going on down in Jeff City. 7:30 right now. We'll be back with Chamilleia Peterson right after this. Sonny, the national debt is still $39 trillion. And joining us is Chamilleia Peterson from Americans for Prosperity. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
So since Friday, we've seen a lot of things shake up in Missouri politics. Was curious what your thoughts were on this. We got Sam Graves out. We've got Chris DeGaulle, who's coming up at the top of the hour to talk with us. He's in. And one thing that surprised me, I didn't see this coming. I thought Tony Luetkemeyer would join the race. I'm told he won't be. I did not see Mike Jones making a move. What's that about?
Well, and the last day of filing is tomorrow. So, yeah, it feels like things have been changing by the hour over the last 3 days or so. But, so I think that, when Mike Jones looked at the landscape and when, Nathan Willett, after Sam Graves made his announcement, and Nathan Willett, kind of made it known that he was interested in jumping into that race and switching, then I think that Mike looked at that and it probably just made sense as far as the opportunity. And that House seat is a really tough seat in terms of the vote split. So it is it's winnable, but when you have to weigh the pros and cons, you take the opportunities when they present themselves, and it appears that this one did.
Yeah, and see, what a lot of people might not know is there's no polling in these House races, these state House races. It's not cost wise. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to spend the money to get polling, even if the polling would be accurate. So you have to look at the fact that in this is a midterm, so it'll be lower turnout. You're also looking, honestly, which is what we are on this show. We don't take things one party or the other. This is shaping up to be a bloodbath for Republicans in the midterm. And if I was Mike Jones and I said, look, I won the last election by the skin of my teeth on a year when Trump was leading everything, and so you had more Republican turnout. This year, things don't look that good for me. It makes sense to jump, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think that's a big factor. And I have not heard, excuse me, if somebody is running will jump into that House race on the Republican side. I would imagine somebody will. But I do think that's one of those districts that it takes a special candidate that's able to thread that needle. And, when Mike Jones ran, initially, his message was one of restoring civility and, dialogue and listening to people. And I think that resonated in that district. And so whoever comes up behind him really is going to have to carry that forward. But, I think that the experience he gained in the House and in his district there will serve him well in the Senate, too, should he win that one.
Aside from all the election stuff going on, which is sucked all the air out of the room, and it'll probably be the focus of everything until the August primary. What's going on under the dome this week that we should know about?
Sure. So a couple of the biggest things for us this next week are electric competition legislation to try to introduce a little more free market competition into our utility industry. There's hearings for that this week. We'll have a Capitol Day. They'll do a press conference. That's all tomorrow. And then I don't know if it is actually out on public yet, so you may hear it here first. But we will also probably have the income tax bill hearing this week as well. So I'm sure there will be a lot of noise around that, and I expect a very full hearing room.
Okay, wow. Okay, that's in the Senate. It'll be a Senate hearing. Who's leading that?
On the Senate side?
Yes.
So on the Senate side, Senator Curtis Trent is handling that when it gets to the floor. The bill that's going to the House side is the bill that was filed by Representative Bishop Davidson and Speaker John Patterson. And Representative Davidson they combined those bills, and he is handling it on the rest of the way through. So he will be presenting that bill, in the Senate hearing.
Okay. All right. What's for everyone who's never been down there, and a lot of people haven't sat through a hearing because they don't hate themselves. They wouldn't drive down to sit through a hearing. What's that like? I mean, let's from the opening. How contentious does it get in there? And I guess what could a person expect if they went down?
Sure, it really varies. It depends on the topic. Most hearings are pretty calm, sometimes downright boring.
Yeah.
But, when you go in there, they usually have, 2, 3, 4 bills on the docket that they're hearing. And so some of them will take longer than others. Some of them, are very short. There's only 1 or 2 witnesses in addition to the bill sponsor, and so those go quickly. But depending on the issue, then you get up there. They call for the witnesses for, and they usually alternate for and opposed. And so you usually get about 3 minutes to say your piece. And then the committee members then have the opportunity to ask you any questions. I know that makes people nervous when they're coming in, but here's what I always tell them is that really it's the bill sponsor, because the bill sponsor has to go first and present the bill and make the case for it. They usually get grilled the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
So then, they kind of take the brunt of it. So they usually don't grill the members of the public that come in to testify too bad, but sometimes, and it's, it's the most important thing that they can hear, though, are the regular people that come in there and testify.
What's interesting was when I went down to Jeff the first time and started actually watching, there are times when you'll get a full room, and mm-hmm. It's fun for me, just from because I'm weird like this, to watch the crowd and start picking out, okay, there's the union group over there. I remember I went in, and I don't remember what the topic was, but I remember just turning around and looking in the entire back row of this hearing room. They all had the same T-shirts on, and they were all tweeting together. And this was back when Twitter was fairly new and was just making a resurgence, or not a resurgence, but it was just coming to its own. The whole back row was organized, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I didn't know what group it was. I didn't care. I was just showing respect for the game. I was like, okay, well done. You've got the whole group here. So you can really start seeing dynamics of how people are organizing down there, the different groups that are involved, because it isn't always just the people down there. There are a lot of special interests that will show up to get their piece of the pie. And that's what I find interesting in those hearing rooms, to see who are the people here, but who are the groups here, and what groups always show up and surprise me when they show up to certain things. I'm like, why are you here? What do you have to do with this?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. And I do tell people, like, sometimes, especially on the conservative side of things, I think that we take for granted that our representatives, if we have, Republican conservative representatives, that they're gonna vote our way. So we really don't have to worry about it. And so we probably don't feel the urgency to come testify in support of something. But I will say that we don't ever want to give anybody the opportunity to say, no one showed up to support this bill. And so it is really important that we get people in there, and there will be, because you will definitely have the lobbyists from the other side, whether it's teachers' unions or the trial attorneys, other various attorney groups. They were the ones who mostly showed up the last time.
It is true that politics goes to those who show up. And very often, the people who show up, they more than once I've shown up and just to observe. Like when I was blogging, when I was running the Missouri Torch, I would show up, and I wasn't there in an activist capacity. I was there more in a observer capacity, kind of like the watchers from the Marvel movies. You don't get that, but there are folks at home who are like, oh, right, I get that. But I would watch, and I would see the most fringe people who'd show up, and you're like, you do not represent a majority of the people, but because they showed up, they got the ear of the legislator when no one else did. And I found that was important, because there were people at home a majority of people didn't agree with this, but since they couldn't be there. One other thing that I find interesting, especially in these in empty hearing rooms, and you see that a lot too, where there's a hearing going on and no one shows up for it, are the things that legislators will say to each other when no one's watching. I remember...
well, I tell you what, they should always remember they're always being recorded.
Yeah. I remember being down there, and it was Noel Torpy was his name. I don't know if you remember him. But it was him and some other folks. They were talking about expanding Medicaid. This was a big deal back then. They wanted to expand Medicaid, and it was being led by Republicans at this time. And I sat there quietly fuming. And this guy says, look, members of the committee, a lot of my friends are birthers. And I was like, what did he just say? Did he just say a lot of his friends are birthers? Now, for those who don't remember, a birther was someone who thought that President Obama was born in Kenya, and there's still a lot of them out there, that he was not an actual citizen and is therefore not eligible to be president. He said, a lot of my friends and a lot of my colleagues, some of you here on the board, on this, in this committee, are birthers, but I'm an expander. I'm for expanding Medicaid. And I'm like, I sat there, I cannot believe what I'm hearing here. And I don't think he realized he was being live streamed, because that was new then. I was the only person doing it, and he probably didn't expect it, but it blew my mind, the things that they will say to each other in these hearings that they think no one's watching.
And it was probably worse then even than it is now, because I don't know when they started streaming on the government site, all of the hearings and the floor activity and things like that. I'm not sure how long ago it was that they started streaming that, but it really does change the dynamic. There's a lot of conversation, right, about whether or not the Senate should have video, of the floor proceedings. We have audio right now for the Senate, but no video, and we have both for the House. But there's debate about whether or not we should do that, and it does create a different dynamic because, yes, being recorded probably should make them watch what they say more, but also it kind of creates a stage for grandstanding too. So there's two sides to that coin.
I had Mike Moon on to talk about this because he's one leading the charge to have it, and I agree with Mike when he says there's no deficiency in grandstanding now. The only difference is it'll be on video. So, okay.
True.
What I saw some news about the REINS Act. What's going on there?
REINS Act is over on the Senate side. It's passed through the committee. It went in and out in the same day, so we're grateful for that. And so next step is getting it on the Senate calendar. So that's up to Senator O'Loughlin. So the ball is in her court now, and we are hopeful that she will move that along soon so we can get it on the floor and have the conversations, because I'm sure there will be a lot of negotiating and some things that will change at that point, and it'll have to go back over to the House. So the sooner we can get all that done, the better. But we're in a really good spot, so I'm optimistic.
Do you think that Senator O'Loughlin will put her name in for Missouri 6th?
Oh, I mean, that would be interesting. I've heard some people speculate that she might, but I've not heard anything too affirmative on that yet, not as much as some of the others, but I also think that Senator O'Loughlin plays her cards close to the vest, so
yeah, she does.
Who knows?
It's a big old district, and there could be a lot of players for this. So, hey, Chamilleia, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Always appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
7:49, this is the Dwayne Lester Show. We'll be right back. This is the Dwayne Lester Show. Thanks for being here. I'm just looking at bestofmidwest.com right now. There's voting is open. So if you haven't been over to bestofmidwest.com, the voting starts there. If you've got somebody out there, whether it's an agricultural group or home and gardens, different services around the area, go over there and go ahead and vote for the folks who you recommend. Bestofmidwest.com. Well, folks, Sam Graves has decided he is going to retire. If you live under a rock, that might be news to you, but that's happening since Friday. Friday, he made that announcement, and almost immediately, Chris Stigall said that he was going to run. So we've got Chris there. We've had Jim Ingram running. I'm guessing that Nathan Willett will get in this race too. Nathan was on the show last week to talk about the all-gender bathrooms at the Kansas City Airport. He's a Kansas City councilman, and he's got a huge base there in the Northland. But Chris used to be on talk radio here in Missouri. He's a former Kansas City area radio talk show host, and he is running. We're going to have him on the show after the top of the hour. But what he said in his announcement is he said President Trump is going to need all the reinforcement he can get in Washington, and that's why I've decided I'm going to leave my show. He's got a show on Salem Radio. He's got over 400 stations, so this is a big jump. He says, I'm running to earn your vote if you live in Missouri's 6th Congressional District, my home. So as of 3:55 Friday, he had submitted his campaign paperwork, and he is now in the race. He's up against 3 Democrats who in this district have no chance. Now, I've said before that this is likely to be a bloodbath for Republicans this midterm. I still stand by that. Missouri's 6th district will not be part of that bloodbath. It is a decidedly red district. So when you think about districts, they categorize them as D or R districts, and then they say plus whatever percentage of win or whatever. So your more Democratic districts might be D plus 5. That's what, when you look at Mike Jones's race down in Parkland, in that Parkville, whatever, that area where he's at, it tends to lean Democrat. So it might be a D plus 1. But Mike Jones was able to go in there and get a win. The 6th district, Missouri's 6th congressional district, is D plus 19. So Josh Smead, Scott Pondelik, and Matt Levine, I'm sorry. I appreciate you putting your name in there. I don't think you have much of a chance. When we see who comes out of this primary for the Republican Party, we'll pretty much know who the next congressperson in D.C. will be for Missouri's 6th Congressional District. It's 7:56. Like I said, at the top of the hour, we'll have Chris Stigall coming on to talk about us. He was part of Graves's staff way back in the day. So I'm curious to see what he has to say. In a phone interview Friday afternoon on KSHB, Graves said about Stigall, I think he would do a wonderful job, but we'll have to see if he does file or not. And like I said, as of 3:55 on Friday, he had filed and is in the race. He's got a huge reaction from members of the media in his running. He's got folks like Mark Davis and Larry O'Connor, who's a friend of mine. He's out in D.C. on the radio out there. They're all supporting him. They're all looking for him to get in there. And folks like Mike Gallagher and Jennifer Horn, they're all behind Chris Stigall. Let's hear what he's going to stand for. Let's hear what he wants to talk about. And we'll be back in a minute with Chris Stigall to talk about his run for Congress in Missouri's 6th Congressional District. Stick around. That is still $39 trillion. I'm Dwayne Lester. Welcome back to the show. So the big news on Friday, I saw this about 5 in the morning because I get up early for this show, folks, so I could give you the best possible news. And I saw that Sam Graves had decided he was not running. And then during the show live, I was talking with someone and they said, Chris DeGaulle just announced. And I said, announced what? And they said, he announced he's running. And so I pulled up the video and we played the announcement video. Chris joins us now. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Dwayne, it's a thrill to be with you, man. Congrats on the success of the show. I know it's relatively new, but I love KNIM a great deal, and I was thrilled to hear they've turned it to a talk station since I've been stomping around Maryville.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. When I saw your announcement, like I said, it was as things were developing on the show, I watched your announcement, and I thought, he's giving up a great job doing talk radio, which I know he loves. He's on 400 stations. He must have lost a bet or come in last in his fantasy football league or something.
Yeah, I've been asked that a few times. Was I held hostage or something like that? I don't think anybody who's relatively wired right necessarily wants to go into politics. I think sometimes you feel like you should or you ought to. And for me, this was such a time, and President Trump is really the role model for me. I know it may sound cliched, but President Trump's home raided, and the kangaroo courts, and the impeachments, and the double assassination attempts, all that the man has weathered. And you talk about the ultimate in a comfortable life, and he's often fought at great personal expense and risk, literally, physically, his family, and done it anyway, sometimes alone. And so when this seat opened, I thought to myself, it's going to be a tough year, but if President Trump can do that, and I believe in his agenda, I want to go and at least do my part on behalf of the citizens of the 6th District who elected him to have his back and stand with him in the House, because he's going to need the help.
So let me ask you a question that is one I kind of base all of the show on here. And it's funny, my son-in-law and I were talking the other day, and he said, I still remember the first thing that you said to me. And I said, oh, what did I say? And I'm going to say to you, Chris, the same thing I said to him the first time I met him. Hey, what's the proper role of government?
I love that question, and I think it's important for people to consider. And I think this 250th anniversary of our country is probably one of the best times to consider it, as a matter of fact. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare. It's the preamble, it's the tee-up, it's the thesis statement. And I think after you get past that, if it's not expressly listed in our Constitution, you can't go there. And what we've seen is such an encroachment on our lives over the last few years. And Dwayne, I know that's what you care about on this show. That's why I'm running, is what we saw, the abuses that we saw from mandates in shots and masks and school closures, and the intrusion into school boards and parents' lives with transgenderism. It's gotten mad. It's just crazy, Dwayne. And I felt to myself, and I saw how it impacted my own family, and I said, this can't be. It can't be happening in this country. When Donald Trump's home was raided, that was the moment I said we'd lost the country if he wasn't reelected. I meant that, and I still do. And I think we were that close to losing the country. The shot mandate, where you lose your job, and Donald Trump's home being raided were 2 points in history that no American should ever forget. Because you want to talk about the role of government, that's the direct opposite. That's the tyranny. That's the No Kings protests that these people are shouting about this weekend. That's what that was, not where we are now.
Yeah. I remember I was trying to get certified in something in training, and when I went for the certification, I said, well, I'm going to be in D.C. during this time. They're holding the testing in D.C. at this time. I'll just go and do it then. I went to D.C. to take the test, and I walked in the building. They looked at me, and they said, you need to have a mask on. And I was like, whatever. And I put my mask on, and they said, okay, can you give us your vaccination records? I'm like, what? And they said, you need to be vaccinated in order to do anything in D.C. right now. I said, you need my medical records for me to sit in front of a computer and take a test. And they're like, that's what the government says. I didn't take my test that day, Chris. I got to tell you,
No.
I walked out. And we allow these encroachments, and we need people who are ready to push back. Now, you've spent 25 years behind the microphone. We were just talking about the fact that it was at the first Tea Party rally that I was introduced to Chris Stigall. I was there with the wife. Walk me through how you went from I'm going to be doing radio to I'm going to enter the arena. What was that process like?
Much like I just was laying out with the COVID era in particular, Dwayne, and I hate to keep harping on going back to that, but it was so haunting to me. We've never lived through anything like that, and I think it was such a dark chapter in this country's history. A lot of us have PTSD, figuratively, no disrespect to people who really have it, but you understand what I mean. I think a lot of us tend to want to say, well, that was then, it's over, it can't happen again. I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. I also, at the same time, during that same period, and so many of us who were in broadcasting at that time were shadow banned and censored. I was pulled down off of YouTube. My show was no longer available there for a long time. My following on social media flatlined immediately. And we now know, thanks to Eric Schmidt, senator from Missouri, who was attorney general at the time and battled the government on this front, as well as the Hunter Biden laptop stuff, all of that stuff, the COVID era, the Hunter laptop stuff, it was all silenced. Any of us who had platforms and were trying to speak to the American public or just to one another about things like shots and closures and things, there was a concerted effort in Washington, D.C. to silence our voices. And it has hung with me. It's hung around my neck. It has haunted me. And even as my career has kept going, and we launched a nationally syndicated show last year, I just kept thinking it feels hollow to sit here and just talk about it. If I don't physically do something about it, if presented the opportunity, then what am I more than just a guy talking about it, you know? And I have kids. I have a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old, almost 18-year-old. And, you know, they're looking at their old man, and this is a consequential time in history. They're young people trying to make their way in this world, and I just felt like I wanted my kids to see their old man doing more than just flapping his gums about something. If he really believes it and has taken some aggressive steps to do something about it, that's the role model I hope I am for my kids.
It reminds me of what got me involved. I remember sitting around and I read something by Thomas Paine. It was from his essay, The Crisis. And he wrote in The Crisis, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, so that my children may know peace." And after that, he wrote, "And that idea should be enough to call all men to action." And it sounds like. And go ahead,
Dwayne. I'm sorry. I would just say, beautifully put. I don't want to suggest for a moment that I'm anything like the greatness of Thomas Paine and our founders. But the one thing they had in common with, I think, most of us, is that they were average citizens. They were people who came from the private sector, if you will. None of our founders 250 years ago were professional politicians, and the most famous of all, George Washington, was one of the most reluctant leaders there ever was. In fact, he knew it was time to hang it up and go back to Mount Vernon, despite the fact that they hoped he'd stay on forever. I love that about George Washington, but the greatest of men that ever founded this country 250 years ago were average citizens, not professional politicians. And that's what I count myself as, just an average citizen who said, I'm going to join the fight.
We're talking with Chris Stigall, who's announced Friday that he's running for Missouri's 6th Congressional District to replace Sam Graves. You mentioned in your announcement that President Trump needs reinforcements in Washington. So as you look to go there, what are some of your priorities? Let's say like 3 priorities that you'd fight for in Congress.
First of all, 100% back what Mike Johnson just did this week, and or this past week, I should say, over the weekend. Thune sends this bill over to him that doesn't fund border, doesn't fund ICE. The notion that we back off of ICE at all is absurd. Law enforcement is not the enemy, and I'm sensing this wariness amongst even some Republicans right now, that they're kind of cowing to the idea that, well, maybe ICE is a little too heavy-handed. ICE is given a job to do, and that's enforce the laws of Congress. And if you don't like what ICE is doing, then change the laws in Congress. But fully funding ICE, fully funding Border Patrol, fully funding our nation's borders keeping those closed, keeping it to zero crossings as President Trump has, that's got to be priority one. If you don't have borders, what have you? Second, election integrity. This SAVE Act. I mean, Dwayne, if you don't have proper elections, proper identification, people legally voting and being able to prove who they are, what have we? So to me, if you don't have borders and you don't have elections that you can trust, for heaven's sakes, everything else is sort of academic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. We talk, you heard me coming in on the top of the hour. We always start the show with here's the weather and the national debt is this. And I do that because I want people to keep that fresh in their mind, because I say it was Admiral Mike Mullen during the Obama administration who said that the national debt is our biggest national security threat. And it was $8 trillion then. It's $39 trillion now. So knowing that going into it, how do you, as a fiscal conservative, plan on tackling that?
It's a big question, and I wish I were smart enough to tell you today that I know specifically how you target it. One thing I do know is there's no excuse for the fraud. What makes me sick are the tens of billions of dollars in fraud that we've been uncovering in places like Minnesota, and you know that's not alone. I suspect they're probably, I'm sorry to say, they're probably nursing homes across the 6th District of Missouri that are engaged in fraudulent behavior and snatching money from Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Dr. Oz, I've talked with him about this. That's a huge issue, the fraud. And I was glad to see J.D. Vance heading up a fraud commission. I'm all on board with AI today, Dwayne. And DOGE, there is no excuse for the federal government to be defrauded. There's no excuse for us to not be able to track quickly where money is flowing. And I'm going to figure out, first of all, how and why that technology is not being deployed against the bloat of the federal government. Because you and I can do things with ChatGPT right now that are amazing. Don't tell me the most sophisticated people in the country can't be deployed on the bloat of the federal government. I just don't believe that. So I want to get to Washington and turn that loose on federal spending for certain. Big fan of that. And then I should just say, to President Trump's credit, and I don't think he gets enough, in 1 year, he has reduced the size of the federal government in terms of employment to the lowest level in 50 years. That's real. That's a start. And nobody talks about that, but he has. And so he's again, almost alone, and that's the shame of it. He has to do it almost alone, but he is trying to reduce at least the size and the vastness of the government. Maybe not always the spending, which is something we can debate, but the size and the vastness and the intrusiveness, I do believe President Trump is committed to reducing, and so am I.
Well, let me ask you this. We've got less than a minute left. If you're elected, how do you measure success in your first term? What are some of the concrete deliverables that you think you can bring back for the folks here in Missouri 6th?
You know, I once talked with my friend Sam Graves about this. I said, what is the most important work you do? And he said, constituent services, and don't ever forget it. And I love that. I spent some time working for the congressman when I was a young man years and years ago. And what I know is most important about a congressional office is when someone is having trouble with their Social Security benefits or Medicare or Medicaid, or they've been branded in a government system as dead or something crazy like that, or they've lost their passport or they're stranded somewhere. Constituent services, helping navigate the bureaucracy, that's job one. And then one of the cool things, getting medals and honors for our veterans who deserve them and maybe for some reason got lost in the shuffle. Also, service academy appointments for our young people who want to enlist. There's no greater joy than seeing the happiness of families, both young and old, when our veterans are honored and kids get to sign up. So those are some tangibles that office gets to do that I can't wait to participate in.
Chris, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. You get up to Maryville, and you're a Bearcat, so I'm a Bearcat, once a Bearcat, always a Bearcat. You get up around this area, maybe we can get you in studio to talk as well.
Count on it. I'll be there, my friend. Dwayne, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. 8:20, this is the Dwayne Lester Show. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more about what's going on in Missouri 6th. This is the Dwayne Lester Show, where principles matter. We talked earlier about the No Kings protests, about how it only matters to them, these principles that they allegedly fight for, when it's the other team doing it. When it's their team, well, by all means, we need kings then. But no kings now. It's absurd. All right, so there's a story out of Fox 2, St. Louis, I want to talk about, because this is something that we've dealt with here. Small businesses across the United States are still waiting for billions of dollars in refunds more than a month after the Supreme Court struck down key tariffs in February. The court ruling identified approximately $55 billion in tariff payments as illegal, yet the funds remain caught in a complex federal administrative process. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce reports that nearly 97% of U.S. importers are small businesses. I did not know that, but that's profound. Nearly 97% of U.S. importers are small businesses. In Missouri, data from the Kansas City Federal Reserve indicates that about 73% of businesses have been harmed by the tariffs, with retailers experiencing some of the most significant impacts. Business owners describe a year of difficult financial trade-offs to manage the costs associated with the tariffs. Matthew Cagle, founder and president of Rig'em Right Outdoors, said his company struggled with the threat of high inventory costs and price increases. Cagle said, "We didn't want to be stuck with a warehouse full of inventory that we couldn't sell because prices were astronomical. So we took a big margin hit, and our customers took a big margin hit, and the retailers, the consumer, took a margin of price increase, so everyone lost." And that is the key point right there. That needs to be talked about more. Who gets these refunds? Okay, you've got $55 billion that they've identified in refunds. So where does that refund go? Does it go to the importer? Because again, it wasn't China that paid these tariffs. That's one thing that this should highlight. Because over and over again, President Trump said we're getting all this foreign money from these tariffs, and it isn't. We're not refunding the money to China. We're not refunding the money to Hong Kong. We're not refunding it to Taiwan, Vietnam. None of this tariff money is going back overseas, which shows who paid it. It was paid by importers here in the United States. So should the refunds go to them? Well, hold up. We've said again and again and again, retailers and businesses don't pay taxes. Tariffs are a tax. Their customers pay the taxes. So you have the importer. They're going to pass that cost on to the retailer. Should the retailer then get the tariff refund? Or should that go to the people? And who gets it? And how much is it? There's a word for this in the military that the FCC will not allow me to use on the air. I could use it once, but then that would be the end of the Dwayne Lester Show. But that sums up this entire situation better than anything I'm able to think of right now. Maybe the word mess. This is such a mess. Because we thought we had someone who could centrally plan global trade. And now we've got $55 billion in tariff payments. And where are they going to go? Do they go to the retailers? They certainly shouldn't go to the retailers. They shouldn't go, if anyone, it could go to the importer, but I guarantee the importer passed those costs on. We just heard him say that. Matthew Cagle, we didn't want to be stuck with a warehouse full of inventory, and I don't blame Cagle for this. He's dealing with a mess that was created by a centrally planned government. That's why I say that socialism, communism, protectionism, they're all the same plant in different stages of development. It's all central planning. And look at the mess it's made. Prices were astronomical, so we took a big margin hit, and our customers took a big margin hit, and the retailers, the consumer, took a margin of price increase, so everybody lost. So where does the tariff refund go? What a mess. 8:29, we've got Representative Josh Hurlbert coming up after the break, talk about what he sees happening down in Jeff City this week. Stick around. As usual, Representative Josh Hurlbert is here Monday morning. Thanks for being here. Are you there?
Change in the couch cushions for that extra $39 trillion.
Well, yeah, we all got to pitch in. We all got to pitch in. I'll tell you. Okay, before we get started, you're in Missouri's 6th District. Anything you want to announce or break news here on the show before we get started? Anything at all?
I have nothing to announce. So I believe you had Chris DeGaulle on earlier. I am fully behind him in his race for 6th Congressional District. I've known Chris for probably close to 20 years now. But
really?
He's my guy for the race.
Well, tell me some stories that'll make it an interesting race then. I mean, you know where the bodies are buried, Josh.
He went to Northwest Missouri State. He went to the TCAP, so there's enough stories out there. But he's used to work for Sam Graves. We went into radio, and now he's got that national show on Salem News, and he wants to actually put words into action.
Yeah. So this is going to be the news for the next few months, at least till the August primary. After the primary, I'd say it's over, right? The race is over. It's just a given.
Yeah, it's a very Republican-friendly district.
Yeah. So when you look at what's going on here, of course, we've got you who plan on running, right? And then, oh, no, you said no, you're not going to run.
No. Yes.
Okay, I'll get you in this race. Well, I may go file it myself. I file this on behalf of Josh. Just let that sit there. And we got Jim Ingram, who's been running since forever. Now we've got Chris DeGaulle. Nathan Willett, he is, according to Mike Jones, he is withdrawing from the Senate race for State Senate 34, and Mike's now running for that, which was a surprise to me. I didn't see that happening, but it makes sense. And Mike had a very tight race for House, and Josh, we're friends. We can be honest. This is probably going to be a bloodbath for Republicans in the general, in the midterm this year. But that's not unusual. We see that when if there's a Democrat in the White House, Republicans tend to do well in the midterms. If there's a Republican in the White House, Democrats tend to do well in the midterms. It's usual.
It's like clockwork, yep.
Yep, so that's going to make that race a little tougher for Mike this time. So it makes sense for him to jump into the Senate race because it might be a little easier there. He does have a primary challenger. But when you look at Nathan, the interesting thing is Nathan withdrawing, and you got to assume it's because he's going to put his name in for the 6th too, right?
That is the anticipation from everyone, yes.
Well, there are some other names out there I want to pitch at you and see what your response is. I've also heard Cindy O'Loughlin. What do you think of that name being in the race?
Yeah, I don't think Cindy is interested at this point in time. She was definitely talked about there for a little bit as someone who might be interested, but I think she isn't. The problem with running for Congress or being in Congress is you've got to go out to D.C., 36, 40 weeks a year, which is itself a drag that way. But it's also, even when you're back home, people want to see you around the district. So it's a very busy job. It's a lot of, being in the U.S. House is very leadership driven, and that the speaker and the floor leader, even more than what we have in Missouri, really set the tone and agenda and get things done that way. So it seems like you're running your head against a brick wall quite a bit out there. So it's not necessarily a fun job, and it's not one that Cindy doesn't seem very interested in at this point in time.
Little known fact: when you're in Congress, do you know what you spend the most of your time doing?
Flying back and forth.
Fundraising. Believe it or not, they spend so much time fundraising, like 20 to 30 hours a week fundraising. I've had more than one person in Congress tell me they did not expect to have to do that much. So you look at it that way. You've got flying back and forth to D.C. and all that entails. Then you've got the time back here and then fundraising. I could see why it would not be attractive. There are other names What do you think about Curtis Gregory putting his name in there? I've heard that.
Well, Curtis, his name is more being floated for the new 5th Congressional District that he lives right in the middle of. So that's what's currently represented by Emmanuel Cleaver, but under the new Missouri First map, kind of gets stretched from Kansas City all the way to Columbia and points south of there as well. So he was he was kind of testing the waters a little bit for that, but I think he's ultimately going to stay home and a little bit closer to his family. That was actually one of the conversations I had with Curtis a couple of years ago when he decided to run for Senate instead of running for a floor leader in the Missouri House, is that he wanted to be home, and his daughter's, a middle schooler and was doing all the school sports and everything, and he didn't want to have to travel all around the state for this fundraiser and that meeting just so that he could, be a floor leader. He wanted to stay a little bit closer to home and the family. So it's, I don't think he's interested in running for either the 5th or 6th congressional seat.
All right, so here's a name I'm going to throw at you that I expect. I would be surprised if I don't see this name at the Secretary of State's website as having filed for this, and that's Maisie. Have you heard that name out there for this?
Yeah, Maisie Christensen. She lives over in the Bethany area, but she has been on record saying that she's strongly considering it. I know she has a background in D.C. She worked for the Trump campaign a little bit, worked for Marjorie Taylor Greene out in Congress as well.
I'm told she's a traitor now, so we can't talk about that.
But Maisie, she doesn't have family back home necessarily. I mean, she doesn't have any kids yet or anything like that, so she's a little bit more mobile that way, and it might be something that interests her. So it's something that she'll have to make that decision, but she's definitely, in the waters, I guess you could say.
So why doesn't it interest you? I mean, you're in the district, you're well known, you have all kinds of connections. You don't have the only person I see talk bad about you is Jess Piper. Why not you?
So probably my favorite thing to do in the world right now is I'm coaching my second grader soccer team. So, and there's just no way you could do that with the congressional schedule. That, the amount of time I would lose with my family is not the kind of time I'm willing to give away that way. So I'm happy to remain here in the Missouri House and just keep fighting the good fight closer to home.
Well, hearing that now, it's clear we have to draft you. So 8:43, we're talking with Representative Josh Hurlbert. You guys are in kind of a lull down there in Jeff City right now, right?
Yeah, so we're last week we got the budget over to the Senate. It had a $1.6 billion cut from last year's operating budget, so we're doing what we can to tighten our belts and get things back, get our fiscal house back in order that way. So what we're now kind of waiting on is just to see what the Senate's going to do over the next couple weeks. If we pass too many House bills this late in the process, they really don't have a whole lot of legs over in the Senate, most likely. So passing too much in the way of new legislation isn't going to be super helpful, but we're going to start looking at some of the Senate bills that they sent us. I think they've sent about 25 or so that they've sent our way, and then as soon as we can start to take those up in committees, see if there's amendments that we want to make, maybe add some House bills onto them, and then send them back to the Senate for consideration.
I think about the fact that we just came out of spring break, and we're describing things as a bit of a lull. And did you ever serve with Senator John Lamping? Were you around when he was around?
I was not there with John, so unfortunately. I've only heard great things about him, though.
So you know of him, maybe know him. One bill that he used to put in every year that he was in the Senate was to cut the session time back from January to March. And I said, why? Why? He's like, because they don't do anything the first 3 months anyway. They don't really get anything done till the end of the year. And I was curious if that's been your experience or if things have changed since John left.
Yeah, sometimes, I honestly think like what we're kind of experiencing now. I mean, you're busy on the front end, mostly with committee work and trying to vet some of these bills on the front end that way. Obviously, the last month of session gets really busy, but you have this time, right here in the middle where it's kind of everyone's doing a Mexican standoff with each other. No, you go first. No, I'll go first. No, it's all that kind of deal going on. So it's there is definitely times where the legislature's not quite as busy as it could be, and I know there's other states that have a much shorter legislative period than what we have here in Missouri. We're not year round. We're only in session there for the 4.5 months or so, but it is definitely longer than some states that way.
We got about 3 minutes left. We're talking with Representative Josh Hurlbert. What is it that you hope to see done, not just this week? Things are slow right now, but what are your goals for the rest of the session?
Yeah, so a couple things that I have. I should have one bill heading over to the Senate this week on the adults diploma program, workforce diploma program. So what it is it's mostly single moms or teen moms that dropped out of high school and are now 21 or older and looking to try and get their high school diploma just so that they can have those career opportunities. So we have a program right now that allows those individuals to take an online high school just to finish their credits that way and get their diploma. But the problem is it's kind of, it has a sunset, expires here in a couple of years, and it doesn't have a permanent funding stream either. So we're trying to, since it is K-12 education, we're trying to wrap it up into the funding formula for our K-12 schools with just a $4 million cap, which is 0.09% of what we spend on our K-12 public education that way. But just so that we can help these again, mostly single moms get their high school diploma and be able to get on their feet and have a hand up instead of a hand out. So we know getting your diploma on average saves the state about $300,000 in safety net expenses that they would have otherwise been spending on that individual. So it's definitely, it helps on both ends. It helps the individual get a little bit more self-worth and be able to stand on their own that way, and it helps the state as well. So the other bill that I'm keeping a close eye on is one that Senator Brad Hudson from down in the Branson area has, and that is a school choice bill where he's trying to reform the Most Scholars program a little bit. One of the catches for Most Scholars is that if you're a second grade or older, unless you have an IEP, that special needs learning plan, you can't qualify for this scholarship. So he's trying to remove that parameter and just open it up to even more Missourians to be able to take advantage of school choice.
So much stuff. It's difficult to track everything that goes on, which is why I appreciate having you on the show, because between you and Chamilleia, I feel like the listeners on Monday have a good idea of what's going on down in Jeff and can keep up on things. So I appreciate you being here once again. And we've got just a few seconds. Any last chance announcements? What do you got?
I announced my re-election for the Missouri House 8th District.
Man. All right. Well, I got some paperwork to do on my own then. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate you being here. This is the Dwayne Lester Show. We'll be back to close things up in a bit. A Republican scrum in the primary. We're looking at Jim Ingram, who was the first to file. He even filed before Sam did. He's been in there for a minute, but last I knew he had raised $0. And while he's getting a lot of media, I don't know that how well he'll do. I'd love to have him on the podcast or on the show here. So if you know Jim, I've looked for him on Facebook. I'm having a hard time finding the real Jim Ingram. I'd love to have him on to talk. If you know him, please send him my way. But we also have Chris DeGaulle, who's announced, and he's in. We had Chris on the show earlier. If you missed that, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. You can go back and watch it. We're live streaming also on KNIM's Facebook page. You can see it and hear it there. He's running out of he's a radio show host out of Kansas City. He's in the district. He's also got ties here in Northwest Missouri. You know, he grew up in Richmond, Missouri, which is in Ray County. He went to college up here, Northwest Missouri State. He is a Bearcat. And, he was in Kansas City starting his radio career. I expect Nathan Willett will announce tomorrow. I was just checking my Facebook page earlier because I said this was interesting. Mike Jones had just announced that he was running for state senate. That would have been up against Nathan Willett. In his announcement, Mike Jones said that Nathan is dropping out of the Senate race. Well, there's only one reason that I can think of, and that's to run for Congress. In my post on Facebook, my friend Ethan Schmidt pointed out that tomorrow there is a special announcement. Nathan Willett, emceed by Pete Mundo. There's a dinner at 6 p.m., the announcement at 7 p.m. It's at First Creek Farm in Kansas City. I'm guessing that tomorrow Nathan announces that he's running to be the new congressman in Missouri's 6th District. And finally, one other person that I expect will get in, Maisie Christensen. She's a state rep over in Missouri's 2nd District. That's Grundy, Harrison, Caldwell, Davies, Worth County. I expect that she will also put her name in. I haven't seen anything on the Secretary of State's website yet saying she has, but I expect that she will, and that will tee up sort of a Trump conservative there in Maisie. And Chris DeGaulle, if you heard, he's also fully on board with President Trump. I'm not sure where Nathan will come out, but being on board with Trump in Missouri's 6th Congressional District is a safe place to be. It's a safe place to be. I sometimes feel very alone here as a conservative libertarian type, not being on board, because it's a lonely place here. Being a Trump conservative, Trump Republican is a safe place to be. But this race will be interesting all the way till August, I think, because Nathan can raise money. Chris has a huge following all across the country, and Maisie will bring up the grassroots. It could be a very interesting race. So I'm curious where you sit on this. We're running out of time, but tomorrow feel free to call in. Or call in number 660-960-0959. I want to hear more from them. My question is always, what's the proper role of government? And I want to hear what they have to say about that. And Chris went right to the preamble. Folks, the proper role of government, secure and defend the rights of the individual. And that's why this No Kings rally that we started off the show talking about is absurd to me, because these are the same people who had no problem with Kings telling us that we couldn't see our family in the nursing home. These people had no problem with Kings telling us that we couldn't have a funeral for those who had passed away. They had no problem telling us that our loved ones needed to die alone. But today they're upset. Today, no Kings. Sorry, folks. Proper role of government, secure, defend the rights of the individual, regardless of what tribe is in power. This is the Dwayne Lester Show. You got to fight for liberty, folks. It's so important, not just for us, but for future generations. But as we're fighting daily for liberty in this world, remember that the ultimate freedom is found in Christ Jesus. So until next time, keep both your liberty and your faith close.